I was like, what am I going to do? Oh, yeah, duh. Let's go to the well, shall we? And just talk about your research. You know about this research. Obviously, it's yours, so better than anyone who might come to the stream because it's yours. So I'm like, okay, I'll do that. So this is my stuff. This is a published one, and this is the final version of this one. It's out at some point. It's in press. Let's see. It was accepted at the end of May, and they said 5 months. So June, July, August, September, October. Jesus, it's not going to be out until October. So we'll talk about that one second. They both have to do with political ideology, but they're two sort of separate ideas that I'm going to talk about. Both have to do with how ideology, broadly speaking, interacts with thinking, broadly speaking. This first one, ideological belief bias with political syllogisms, was probably my first and only publication in the journal Thinking and Reasoning. When I started grad school, that was a goal of mine to get published in Thinking and Reasoning. And I did that last year, and I'm done. That's it. Not gonna try. I'm honestly not gonna try again unless my two collaborators here, Dustin and Abe, want to do something else. They were doing something else on their own. They didn't invite me to participate in, so I'm a little salty about that. Maybe, but you know, they're fine men, so I don't much care. But anyways, we got this thing published, and this, I'll tell you what, is a labor of love. A decade-long labor of love. Why is it a decade long? Well, here's the problem. Well, maybe it's not a problem. This idea in the paper, this idea was my master's thesis. And so I started the basis for this paper. I started that project a decade ago in 2010. A decade ago, okay? I mean, it got published at the end of 2019, so it took 9 years. Almost 10 if I had started it in 2009, but I didn't. My master's thesis was fine. There were issues methodologically with the arguments that I used. I tried my best, you know. I tried my best. I defended their use, and they were okay. They just weren't stellar arguments. And so when I started my Ph.D. program at a different school with different advisors, this sort of fell by the wayside. I did try to collect data online for it. That didn't really pan out. Abe here was my master's advisor, and Dustin here was on my master's thesis committee. So the three of us literally represent the 3/4 of this initial project, which I think is pretty darn cool that you can, you know, have mentors and essentially superiors, then work with you once you're on the same level. Science is pretty awesome like that. Once you get to a certain level, everything's almost a level playing field as far as scholarship goes. Now, that is not the case for various other things like race and gender and all that. It's not a level playing field, unfortunately. But, so, this kind of went dormant for a few years. This project went dormant for a few years. And then in 2018, Dustin contacted me and he's like, I have some ideas about how to improve the arguments, syllogisms, right? These 3-statement deductive arguments, and I'll show you what they look like in just a minute. And I said, yeah, sure, I'd love to be a part of that. and I basically gave him my blessing to take control of it, which is why he, and not me, is the first author. Okay, because that's generally speaking how you handle authorship at this point. So he modified the syllogisms from my earlier attempts, and he made them really good. He made them very sound. So much so that when this went up for review, nobody had any qualms about the arguments themselves. They were solid. So I commend him 100% for his work on those, because syllogisms, I gotta tell you, they are not easy to write. They are not easy to write. Now, if you're not familiar with what a syllogism looks like, let me scroll down here before I talk about what this is. Please tell me we have some syllogisms in here. Cool. Nope. Okay. You can go see our pre-reg for that. Okay, here's a method. Okay, here they go. Not as chonky as I would have liked, but they at least are italicized. So here we have. So what we did was we compared general knowledge syllogisms with political concluded on a divided ideology. So conclusions that were political in nature on a divided ideology. And so basically what we did was we created conclusions that would be endorsed, that should be endorsed by liberals, and we created arguments and conclusions that should be endorsed by political conservatives. And that's essentially the only division that we did. We only had these two sets. We pre-tested the arguments to make sure that that's the effect that we were getting from another group of people. That was all good. But here's what a syllogism looks like. Robins have feathers. Okay. Or robins do... Well, these are conclusions. Great. Okay. Well... oh, gosh. So, for this one, robins have feathers. It would be something like, all birds have feathers. Robins are birds. All robins have feathers. That's a syllogism. Okay, so you can imagine how that would then extend to robins do not have birds, which is not believable, right? Robins do have... robins have birds. Robins have do not have feathers would be a non-believable. So what we did was we manipulated believable conclusions that were believable on general knowledge, conclusions that weren't believable on general knowledge, and then liberal conclusions and conservative conclusions, and we had people do all of them. Okay, and I think there were 32, 16 general knowledge ones and 16 political ones, and each of those divisions, 8 believable, 8 unbelievable, respectively, with the general knowledge, and then 8 liberal, 8 conservative, and then within those 8, oh, you got to stick with me here. Reasoning research is rough, and within those 8, half of them, so 4, were valid arguments. And validity in deductive arguments. I wish I had my little steno pad, but I don't have that yet. Later this week or early next week. You would validity is a function of the argument's structure. Okay, as a function of the argument's structure. And then, so if something is valid, it has the right structure. If something is invalid, it has the wrong structure. And when a deductive argument is invalid, that means its conclusion cannot be true. Okay? It cannot be true. regardless of what it says, regardless of what the conclusion connotes, okay, it might be true in your brain because you have that belief, which is where ideology comes in. But it is not true in the sense that you cannot make that conclusion from the other two statements of the syllogism. Okay, so what we do is we give people arguments to validate, to essentially say this conclusion's good, this conclusion's bad.
And there was much rejoicing.
I'm not sure why that keeps playing. To be honest with you, this soundboard it's kind of strange. Okay. Soundboard settings. Maybe that'll tell me. Solo, one sound at a time. That's perfect. Yeah, it doesn't say why it keeps playing. I don't want it to keep playing. And there was much rejoicing.
And there was much rejoicing.
Okay. Great. Let's click off of that. Sorry. Playing with stream toys. Shouldn't be playing with stream toys during the stream. Shouldn't be playing with stream toys. Alright, where was I? Oh, so I was saying... So I was saying that we essentially trick people by getting them stuck in their beliefs. Because I gotta tell you, deductive syllogisms and accepting or rejecting a conclusion is really hard. They're super easy when you're like, all this is that, all that is there, therefore this is there, right? All this is there. You can see how the words that I use did not actually matter. Because the conclusion that all this are there, 100% valid. I didn't make the rules. Aristotle did. Anyways, so we gave people these 32 arguments. And I want to show you here. So a conservative conclusion, or a liberal conclusion, immigrants have not damaged American culture. And a liberal conclusion would be creationism can be taught in public schools. Okay, so these had two premises above them. So these were just the conclusions. Okay. We also had them take the cognitive reflection test. The cognitive reflection test is fun. I'll give you one. I'll type it. I'll also say it. Okay. This is one of them. A bat and a ball cost $1. Oh, I should put the dollar sign, shouldn't I? $1.10. The bat costs $1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? Boom. Okay. I didn't really time that well with verbal and so this is a cognitive reflection test. Okay, this is one of the questions. In the original one by Frederick, there were 3. And then in the newer one, which is what I believe we used in this study, has 7. Okay. Anybody want to take a guess as to? I mean, you're thinking about it now. The longer it's been up, the easier it is to come up with the actual right answer. There are 2 answers that are given with this particular question, and all of the cognitive reflection test questions. The intuitive one, and the non-intuitive one, or the reflective one. Okay. Carson, well done. Well done. The longer you looked at it. So that's the non-intuitive one. What's the What's the intuitive answer? What would you answer really quickly? You would probably answer, yeah, there you go, Martian. Excuse me. You would answer 10 cents because you look at the $1.10 and then you see that the bat costs $1. Okay, the ball costs 10 cents then. Well, you have to read the word after $1. Dollar more. If you're reading this very quickly and you are, your thinking style is cognitively quick, intuitive first, okay, an intuitive first thinker, you're going to say 10 cents, and that's, of course, the wrong answer. And then there are other ones. So we had them do that, which give us a sense of how their cognitive style informs their reasoning ability. Okay, and that's important because people who score poorly on the CRT are often generally referred to as lazy thinkers. So, hey, thanks for the follow, OneFut. Welcome to the party. Okay. We asked them what their political conservatism is. Okay. And we use the social and economic conservatism scale to help us out with that. So this is basically a two-dimensional scale asking people about various well-known social issues and well-known economic issues, right? So you could consider on the sex here. I said I was 12. 6 questions are about social issues, so you could imagine abortion being one of them. Okay, and then on the economic scale, I believe there's one about taxes. Okay, or big government. Like small. Are you more big government or small government? Whatever, right? So we got 2 scores, one for their social scores and one for the economic scores. And the reason why we didn't put them together, well, for one thing, the Everett who created the sex suggested not to, because why get 2 dimensions if you're just going to crunch them down into a single number, right? So we have the 2 scales, and then we can use those in statistics separately, right? And what else did we have them do? Yeah, just those 3. Yeah, just those 3. So here's what happens. There are no differences between people who would likely consider themselves a political conservative and a political liberal, and as well as moderates. There was really no difference in performance on the general knowledge syllogisms. They were caught up with validity. So supporting hypothesis 1, valid conclusions were accepted more than invalid conclusions, and that's generally speaking what you find. And there's also a believability effect. We could call this the belief effect, where believable conclusions are accepted more often than unbelievable conclusions. And there's sometimes an interaction between believability and validity, and this is we call it the belief bias effect. Okay, where believable invalid conclusions are accepted at a higher rate than they should be. So on the political syllogisms, however, there was a difference in conservatism predicting acceptance of conclusions. Okay, this is important. And it was mainly with conservatives. So the higher somebody's conservatism was, the more likely. I'm actually just. So actually, I can show you right here. So I think this is from experiment 1. Yeah. So participants' conservatism. So positive numbers, because we used centered z-scores. So 0 was direct center. Positive numbers are higher conservatism, lower numbers are liberalism, or less conservatism. Okay? And then the conservative bias that they showed, positive numbers here reflect more bias, whereas negative numbers reflect less bias. Now, why does it say conservative bias? Why did we choose conservative bias? Well, we could have chosen liberal. They would have been the exact same. They would have been the exact same measures, but you would see the opposite line. The line would be going from up here to down here instead of how it looks right now. So we could have chosen either one, but here's an interesting point about political psychology. Most of the findings that you see in the literature when comparing liberals and conservatives in whatever way they choose to compare them will likely state things as conservatives do this, so conservatives using the positive verb, and liberals using the do not do this, or the negative form of the verb. Not to suggest that one is positive and one is negative in its valence. It's just the language that's used. So people respond more kindly. Sounds better in our ears. It makes us. It allows us to think more lazily when we use positive verbs than negative verbs. Nots, nos, things like that. We can't really picture no and not, and so that's why things get phrased here as conservative, and so that's why we decided to do that. So the other, the main reason for this scale was because it's called the SEX, Social Economic Conservatism Scale. So it just makes sense to say this is positive, and when you're comparing the two, they shouldn't be opposites of each other. So this shouldn't be liberal bias. It has to be the same, in the same direction. So more conservative, less conservative, around 0. So that's why I did that. And so you can see here that the more conservative somebody was, the more bias they showed on the task. That is the belief bias that I mentioned, where there is an interaction of believability or concurrence of somebody's personal ideology and the conclusion of the argument that they're looking at, whether it was liberal or conservative. Because, like I said before, we designed the arguments to either be endorsed by the average conservative or endorsed by the average liberal. So we already had a way to convert performance on those 16 syllogisms into a single bias score. And so you can see here, this is a positive relationship. Hey, Dr. Young's Lab, thanks for the follow. Welcome to the party. We're just talking about scatterplots, because that's what this is, with a very nice slope here. Now, it's not a super strong correlation, so I qualify these conclusions by saying that the trend here, it's a significant trend. That is, it's statistically significant. But it is just a trend. Now it's an improvement on earlier trends. So in my master's thesis, I essentially saw this in a slightly different way. But the conclusion was essentially the same. In the follow-up research that we did in like 2012, 2013, 2014, somewhere around there. I think it was more like 2012, 2013. We saw the same thing. We saw the same thing again. It was actually a much. I improved the arguments, but we didn't improve the data. To put it bluntly, we didn't improve the data at all. We actually got crappier data from my testing of college students by asking M-Turkers to do it. So we got worse data. The trend was almost there, but it was not significant. It was essentially a null effect. So that's why I kind of dropped it, because it was really unclear with my first round crappy arguments in my master's thesis. And then, 2 years later, or, a year or two, I guess, because I defended my master's thesis in 2011. So yeah, it was like a year or two later to get null findings when the master's thesis had, shaky findings. I was like, well, I'm kind of done with that. So I didn't want to do it anymore. And then so we improved upon it again, and we got the same stuff. And I'm actually I'm really happy about this. Like, have you ever been vindicated 10 years later? It's the best freaking feeling in the world. And this is science, by the way. Taking a decade to make sure you're doing the thing right by trying to improve and replicate. The science right there. It's the quintessential science experience. I will die on that hill. And which is why lots of times we don't get to say that as scientists. I would imagine you would agree, Dr. Young. Research isn't glamorous. We toil away at the research, and most of the time it sucks. Most of the time it's slapping you down. I'm getting massive digressions happening this stream, but I kind of do love it. So vindicated 10 years later. It's a wonderful feeling. I hope, if it hasn't happened to you yet, but if it does, it's a mind-blowing experience. I say this, you got really, really lucky. Your research, okay, fair enough. I knew some lucky people in my program, and they'll remain nameless. And I love them to death. But those people, they knew who they are, and they suck. Okay, so here's the thing. So so my initial idea, I'm vindicated early on, is amazing. Nobody's talking about this finding, and it really makes me sad. It really makes me sad. We did a second experiment to replicate, and we did. Wasn't the strongest replication, as you can see, but a replication nevertheless. So, and that's why we had to include it. And then another thing that you might come across is that I might, or other researchers or other scientists might regard those previous two studies that I did as file drawer. And even though my master's thesis is technically unpublished, and the follow-up that I did a couple of years later didn't pan out, and so that did kind of go into the file drawer, they all made their way into this paper in some manner of speaking. And so I don't regard it as a file drawer, because even though the middle experiment, but the online group, sucked, that data sucked, and then we technically got null results, the pattern that we saw 2 years early earlier was there, and then again in 2018 and 2019. So, yeah. And what does this have to do with politics? Well, consider this. Consider the ideology of conservatism, and I'm specifically talking about American conservatism. So, right-wing policies in social issues and in economic issues. So, small government, low taxes, essentially no abortions, pro-life. Get rid of or defund Social Security and Medicare in order to have a smaller operating budget, blah, blah, blah. All those things. So if you take all those things, and you put it into just a broad ideology, and you start to ask yourself the question, okay, if somebody has these values and somebody has these beliefs and these attitudes, what may have prompted this? Or what comes after this? These are just correlations, and so it's a bidirectional relationship. We are not saying one way or another that bias causes conservatism or conservatism causes bias. We do have a theorized direction for it, and that is, because this is on the x-axis, we argue that conservatism, that is the ideology, the cluster of beliefs and values in a person, will generate some follow-up behavior that would be considered a reasoning bias. Okay? Believing arguments that in and of themselves are invalid. Okay? And thus are not true. Can't be true. So, when we see patterns like this, you have to wonder. It always makes me wonder, because when I first did this research, I did not. I had maybe a preconceived notion, and that was my own bias in that time of my life. It was just after Obama had gotten elected for the first time, and I was watching a lot of cable news, which I shouldn't have, and I've since stopped. It's actually kind of funny. When I left to go to my Ph.D. program, I literally stopped watching cable news. And it was all due to the fact that that was basically the only channel I got at the job that I was working before I went into that program. So I always thought that I thought that maybe there would be some differences between conservatism and liberals. But I didn't consider it to be something like this and over again, which I think is really cool. That it's so consistent, and no knock against conservatism here. I mean, I have my own personal issues with conservatism, but no knock on the people themselves. By no means do we want to say that political conservatives are more consistently biased in all of their lives. No. It's just this particular thing that they're more biased at. And it's a continuum, right? We purposefully kept these as continuous scales, right? From +2 to -3, or -3 to -3, technically, is what it is. And then this scale, an arithmetic combination of believability and other measures. Okay. So no knock against conservatives themselves. The other thing that I want to mention is that this is in line with some of the other findings, replicated findings with conservatives, and cognitive rigidity. Cognitive rigidity, that is, somebody is less likely to change their mind or engage in thinking activities if they don't have to. So they are more set in their ways, more set in stone, so to speak. Cognitive rigidity. And so bias is spawned out of those ideologies, okay, and the lack of flexibility, okay, that is associated with it. So, I really love this finding. It's my baby number 2, because actually my baby was the MBTI is garbage article that I did in a stream last month. You can go catch that. It's I think the title of the VOD is why the MBTI sucks or something like that. I don't remember. So I actually did not get a chance to talk about this one at all. It's gonna be out in Political Psychology in like a month or two. So I will talk about this again. I might continue this conversation on Sunday, on my Sunday morning stream. But, yeah, I want this to come out. Darn it all to heck. Fing dang diddly dang dude deadly. Anyways, I will link it will be linked lots of places if you do want to read it. But like I said, I'll probably continue this conversation. But if you want to read this one, you can go to my website, swanpsych.com, and go to the research tab, and I am sharing them there. There's nothing sus about that. Shh, don't tell anyone. Hey, if you tell anyone... But anyways, I'll talk about this more on Sunday, because it is actually pretty cool. Because I talk about, because this is really good topic, science denialism. So, yeah, buddy. So we talk about that in this one. And that's gonna be... I think that's going to do it for the stream. So, thanks to all the new followers. If you're still around, thanks for coming by and adding to the... it's over there. I need to stop. Go, there we go. Flat. I got to remember flat. Up there at the top, the September follower goal. Hey, what is today? The 2nd? It's my mom's birthday. Follower goal for September. Let's get to... 300 minds to fill with random psych stuff. 300 by the end of the month. I think we can do it. Put the call out. Say, hey man. Hey girl. You see that guy? Cockpsych Prof? You should go look at his stuff. And maybe give him a follow. That'd be nice. All right, everyone. I bid you adieu for this office hours and psych stuff stream. I should make a title card.
And there was much rejoicing.
Bill, I was just about to end, unfortunately. That's all right. You're good. You could watch the VOD. It'll be available in 2 seconds. All right, everyone. Have a good night, or morning, or afternoon, or whatever, wherever you are on this lovely rock. I really shouldn't say that. That's a YouTuber's, kind of like a YouTuber's. So I probably shouldn't steal from them. Bye.